Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Hope y'all are having a happy Thursday and that you are as excited as we are to kick off today's amazing chat with Karen. So before we jump into our questions, I'm going to do a real quick housekeeping update. So like I said earlier, you can participate in a couple different ways. You can turn on your cameras if you would like to, no pressure. You can come on audio, like to come off mute to ask a question or add a comment. But we ask that if you are not actively asking a question or saying anything, you remain on mute. It helps maintain audio clarity for everyone on the call. If you have any privacy concerns, no worries. You can always participate by putting questions or comments into the group chat on Zoom. You can also DM me directly if you would like your question raised, but you would like to be kept anonymous. Like I said, today's session is being recorded. Everyone's going to get a link in an email in about 1 to 2 business days. So I would guess probably next week, like Monday, and that'll have a link to where you can rewatch today's recording. Now, if Karen says something amazing and you cannot wait to share it with a friend or a coworker or a relative, no worries. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'm going to share the link to that here in just a moment. And that's where you'll be able to see this video. It'll go live on our YouTube, usually within about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of today's session. It'll be posted onto our channel. So as we get going, there's my link there. Like I said, please feel free to participate if you would like to. No pressure. You can always just sit back and kind of take everything in. There's the link for you for our YouTube channel right there. And then you can also keep up with us on our various social media. So I recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a great way to make sure you don't miss chats like today. But you can also follow us on multiple social media platforms. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, in addition to YouTube. So I'm really excited to, we talked a little bit about Lockheed Martin and their whole company page earlier. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that again, but I just want to highlight, I'll share the link in just a moment to where you can check out their company page. So let's jump into our introductions here. Karen Oliver is a senior manager at Lockheed Martin, and Karen is responsible for a team of 150 technology engineers in fields such as EO and IR, RF, signal processing, and machine learning, who are designing cutting-edge technology for our nation's defense products. Karen has over 20 years of experience in remote sensing system design with engineering designs that are flying on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter and the F-15 Eagle fighter jets. Karen has a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Central Florida and an MBA from the Crummer Graduate School of Business at Rollins College. So welcome, Karen. We're so happy to have you join us today.
Thank you. Really glad to be here, actually. Thank you.
So as we get started, I just want to highlight real quick some of the principal themes we're going to cover in today's conversation. These are themes we came up with both from talking to Karen prior to today's session and taking a look at all the questions you all submitted. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to try and hit these high points. We might not get to everyone's question, but if you want to make sure your question is answered, the best way to make sure is to come off mute and ask it, to put it into the Zoom group chat, or to DM me. And just keep in mind, if you do come off mute to ask a question, we'd love to hear it. Just make sure you're not interrupting Karen or one of our other attendees. So Karen, to jump into this afternoon's questions, let's talk a little bit about skill acquisition. A lot of people wanted to know how and when they're supposed to recognize that they should acquire new skills to be successful in their roles. And I find this a really interesting concept, especially when not every company has a like an internal development program or company-wide training processes or protocols. So how do you handle this, or how have you handled this in your career?
So I usually start, if I'm in a new skill, a new area, I start by just trying to learn, right? Get the foundation, get experience from other more experienced people, or we call subject matter experts. And then once I've kind of built some confidence there where I've gotten an assignment that I can fully execute on my own, I know that I'm set there in terms of that skill level. Before I move to the next one though, I like to try to find an opportunity where I get to lead something I already know so that I can make sure I'm transferring my knowledge to someone else who's just starting in their career. And so once I've been able to make those two steps where I can execute alone and I can train and teach someone else to do the same thing, then I feel like I've set there on that skill, and time to go off and learn a new one.
Sounds good. And I think this is like especially helpful, when people maybe, even if they don't have like a new project coming up, it can feel kind of difficult to understand, how often you should be taking a look at upgrading your skill set or doing continuing education. What's been your experience with this? Like, how have you handled stuff like, kind of keeping up with the latest changes in the tech that you use, or, various things like that?
That's actually constant. That's never stop reading articles. I never stop watching the news, especially in the defense industry, things that are happening, looking at how our products are operating in the field, talking to our customers who tend to be the pilots or operators of the equipment we're using. And so just kind of gauging things that they like to see. And so I try to, and because creating new technology requires understanding where the technology is, having that foundation, but where it needs to go. So constantly researching and reading papers on my own time, right? It becomes part of who you are. We have quite a few people here that they read the industry articles, the industry magazines. They have subscriptions, and it just you're reading it over a cup of coffee in the morning. You chat about it with friends over lunch. It just becomes part of who you are. So you're constantly learning by being engaged in it, as opposed to just trying to take a class here or there, because you really don't learn from just the classes. That gives you the foundation, it gives you the theory behind the technology, but the application of it, the experience with people using it, is where you really grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're doing that constant checking, are there any specific, kind of blogs that you follow, or pieces in, blog posts or periodicals, or different resources that you go to, or is it more based on kind of topical? What do you need to know, or what are you trying to brush up on at the moment?
A little bit of both. So I subscribe to different industry journals. My passion is electro-optics, and so they come to my inbox, right? They come in my inbox, I get a link, I try to click those links at least once a week, to kind of go see what articles, what technology is being developed. But then also just in the environment of interacting with customers, interacting with different programs, defining kind of what the technology needs to go to, where is that technology roadmap, and then going off and seeing what technology is out there, what's cutting edge, how do we get that technology into our facility and start getting it integrated into products. So it's actually a little bit of both, of what do we need, what do we think we need, as well as just what's out there in general, right? Because there may be something that comes in these journal articles that I read weekly that says, hey, we might actually be able to use this. Let me go find an application.
I love that. That's so great. And you're right. It is, in this era of like kind of constant learning, which is not going to, it's never going to slow down. Come on.
No.
But yeah, that idea of like staying nimble and really kind of almost like being autodidactic, like trying to have to kind of keep your eyes open and looking at a bunch of different sources, as opposed to kind of like siloing yourself into, this is where my updated information is going to come from, or until it crosses my desk, I don't need to know it. I love that. Okay, so we also had a lot of questions regarding soft skills. So this one person asked, which are some of the key soft skills that are more required to thrive in an engineering position? And how can we foster them as we grow and progress up the ladder?
So soft skills and engineering are really fun, kind of oxymorons. Historically, engineers are usually the quiet, shy ones, right? But I think communication. I'm not sure it matters what industry you're in or what field you're in. Communication is very, very important. To break that down, as an engineer, you have to be able to communicate with your team members. So you're going to have people who have the same experiences as you, as well as those who don't. You have those who have more experience than you, those who are new to the industry as a whole, and being able to explain technical content clearly, both up and down, is definitely a skill that needs to be worked on. Presenting technical content as well. We love our charts and graphs and our spreadsheets and tables, all of our equations. I'd love to see the charts that are full of equations. But you got to know your audience, and so knowing how to present and relay the information to the audience you are speaking to, and sometimes that audience is very diverse in terms of their knowledge base. There are times, especially with major design reviews, you have customers who are very business minded and not technically minded, but they need to understand the material just as well as the customer based engineering teams. So I think communication, presentation skills, and then just basic interpersonal skills are great, right? You need to work in a team. There's no one here doing this alone. And so knowing how to just get along with people. Yes, you may have a bad day, and having a team and a leader on your team who recognizes that everybody has a bad day, but not letting that be your everyday attitude. So basic skills that I think apply across any industry still apply in engineering. Technical presentations, though, that's a big one because we are not great at it sometimes.
That honestly almost sounds very similar to like bedside manner or like patient communication when it comes to like a healthcare relationship. Because you have to. It sounds very similar to when you have to kind of like explain to somebody what's going on so that they can make the choice of how they want to proceed. But yeah, you have to be able to explain that to somebody who's not within your group and doesn't know all the things that you know. So that sounds like it could be very tricky. How do you recommend working on that? Is it just practice makes perfect, or are there certain things that teams can do together to kind of foster that within themselves so it's not constant like using clients as guinea pigs kind of thing?
So we do have teams that there's some people that do it better than others. A lot of in our facility here, we do a lot of pre-meetings, I'll call them, or dry runs of our meetings that allow the engineers a chance to get up in front of the group. And there are still many of us that still do this in person as opposed to virtually, and actually present their chart deck and answer questions and get all the jitters out. And we try to make sure that happens as often as possible. There are other groups who take it a step further, and they have leaders who really have strong presentation skills, and they train their team members. They give them specific pointers as they are developing their charts and presentations. They have them practice individually, one-on-one, and then they do it as a bigger group before they even make it to the dry run. So when they get into their dry runs, they are pretty well polished. So I think it depends on your presentation skills, but teams that the more effort you put into it, I think you end up with just much better communication and much better presentations with the practice.
Absolutely. So apologies, everybody. I'm having some issues with my Zoom. It's appeared to have lost my Zoom toolbar, so I can't mute myself. So apologies in case there's snoring from the hallway. I kicked the dogs out, but they're mad. So my apologies for this. But let's keep going on some of these points that you're making. And actually, before we go off of the soft skills idea, we did have a question from the comments or from the Zoom chat. Arushi was asking, is empathy or emotional intelligence important in the field of engineering?
It's important in life, is my opinion. We are working on changing the culture that has been historically known in the tech industry. And so I believe it is required of our leaders. And being a leader now, I definitely know that, but it is definitely a requirement of our leadership. But we're adding that as part of our culture to just make sure people recognize the diversity of background and experience, so that when comments are made, or you're standing and then you're giving a technical briefing, that you pause and reflect before you actually just blurt out whether or not somebody's data is incorrect, right? It could be something simple like that, but that person may not receive your comment in a positive way or a constructive way. So we are trying to train our workforce overall to be more empathetic, to be more inclusive of everyone, and how they interact and what they need to be heard.
Yeah,
so it's definitely a skill that is important, and our company is really pushing to make sure the entire culture is set that way.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And you're right, these are skills that you need in everyday life. It's also one of those things that makes more mature workers or older workers really valuable, because these are things you can learn, but you can't learn them overnight. And so you kind of develop these skills both by working, with teams in your professional life, but also just by being a person who lives in the world. So definitely don't underestimate the importance of soft skills when it comes to careers, even as seemingly impersonal as tech or engineering. We had this question from one of our attendees or one of our registrants, and I thought this was really interesting. This person says, I'm trying to pivot to the engineering industry. I've been studying for a long time, but I don't have any technical or practical experience. I do have vast experience in sales though. How can I identify which transferable skills will help me during the interview process? And I thought this was interesting because sales is one of those fields that's also pretty heavy on soft skills, I feel like. And so I'm kind of interested to see if you've seen any correlation between the two, or if you've ever even experienced this kind of pivot.
So that will say it is a very difficult pivot to make. What I've seen people do is go from, it depends on what sales you're in, but if you're not in a technical sale position now, to get into one, to give you exposure to the technology, to the jargon, honestly, and then, and yes, you could study, but keeping up with what the latest technology is, finding that area of technology interest and trying to get into an engineering sales position that aligns with that interest, so that then you get out there and you're meeting the industry people and you're making those industry connections, and then taking your sales work to that next level of really understanding the technology for what you're selling. So for example, we have many vendors for our test equipment that's in our labs, and let's say in a simple oscilloscope, right? Actually understanding how that oscilloscope operates and the benefits that it would bring to use in a laboratory environment. When you go talk to those engineers, you're showing that you have that skill and that knowledge, not just that you're trying to sell a product. And so I think that helps. It at least helps you bridge the gap and make the connections into the people in that industry, and then working your resources from that connection to try to find an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for kind of detailing that out for us. All right. So like we've talked about, you have to stay up to date on a lot of changes, both within your field, like within engineering, but also because of the industry in which you operate, within the defense industry as well. So how do you cope with new change or even potential for new change when it comes to your career? Obviously, like some of these things are changes that we seek out, like, extra projects or promotions or whatever, but a lot of times these changes can be completely out of our control, or something that might be entirely unexpected. So how do you handle that constant change?
That goes back to learning, building the skills, and then I'll say not just the soft skills, but building the technical skills, having a breadth of skills. So I tell all of my earlier career engineers and those that I mentor to first pick what your heart loves. What do you want to do? And build a lot of depth in that. But once you've kind of gotten some of that under your belt, start spreading out and start to build some breadth, because especially in this industry, a contract could be going great one day and be cut the next day. And that team that was working that contract would then have to get moved off to go do something else. And if you have a set of skills and things that you enjoy doing, that allows your leadership to move you around much more effectively. And you don't feel like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do, because you've got enough breadth and some depth. And so maybe you get the exact same thing you were doing before in a different program, but if you don't, you have some other opportunities. So always, constantly growing your skills, constantly learning. And then when you have enough depth, spreading it out a little bit to make sure you can move around.
I like that. And I think that like we've heard that from a lot of people, right? The idea that even if you do want to become like a subject matter expert in one thing, having that broad knowledge base it's never a bad thing. It's never like, oh, why do I know so much about this extra area? And you can always, kind of jettison the knowledge later if you don't need it. All right. So when it comes to these new changes, especially things like moving into a new role, I feel like a lot of people kind of come into these new roles and want to show value, right? You want to show the rest of the team or the rest of the department why you're there. So have you ever had this issue where you need to kind of quickly prove your abilities to to a new group, but you want to do so without seeming arrogant? I feel like this isn't necessarily a concern that maybe male applicants have, but I feel like it's definitely something that hopefully is changing, but for my generation and earlier was very heavily socialized into us, right? You don't brag, you don't like kind of toot your own horn about things. It's supposed to be a team effort, and it's really easy to seem arrogant or full of yourself. Have you had to encounter this in the past or deal with this?
Oh, yes.
As I ask the woman who is an engineer and also Black in this amazing defense field, which is a lot of white dudes. So
Yes.
please share with us.
I will say when I first started much earlier in my career here, I came in and I buried my head and learned what I was wanting to do. And I actually, I got an assignment I didn't want to do, but I excelled at it because I was like, they hung a carrot out there. Here's the thing you want to do, but we need your help doing this first. So can you do this? And then we'll let you go do the other thing. So I pushed through, did that, and excelled. And so, and it turned out to be great because I built a reputation with that team. And then they let me go off and do the technology work that I wanted to do. And when I started doing that, I didn't have a lot of help. So I had to do a lot of self-study, a lot of learning, a lot of overtime just to get up to speed, because I was being asked questions that I had no one else around me who really knew the answer to, but they didn't trust me because I was new. So I put the effort in to make sure, double check, triple check all of my analysis, check my equations. I did all of that. I put in the extra time to build that confidence in myself so that when the questions were asked, I could answer them. I later found out that I knew more than people who had been doing similar jobs, had been doing for 10, 15 years. I knew more than them, but they never let on that they didn't know. And I trusted them. And so when I finally realized that, I've learned, and this is one of the things I do when I mentor, is I let people know, even if you're early in your career, even if you're new to the team, don't believe that you know nothing. Don't necessarily trust everyone that is, what we call a SME, because there's a lot of things they still don't know. You can learn from them and all, but don't put yourself down, right? Don't put yourself under them and don't put them on a pedestal. And I have gone through my whole career that way ever since those experiences, because I realized we're all human, we're all learning, we're all growing, and we all have a different knowledge base. And I'm no less than anybody else. I don't, and so I started to just believe in me.
Yeah.
I don't worry about what other people say or think, honestly. I can't. I just do the job that I want to do, and I want to do a great job. I want to excel because it makes me feel good. And if I look great to them, wonderful. If I don't, that's their problem, not mine.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for calling that out, because I feel like it's one of those, I have one of these moments on every single chat, no lie, where somebody says something and it's usually something like, kind of not simple, but like clear. And I have this moment of like, mind blown. How did I not think of it in that way before? But thank you so much, because I am absolutely going to have your voice in my head the next time I'm like kind of down talking myself, or maybe not making assumptions when I should be maybe being more curious, or just asking questions about what's going on around me. Do these people actually know more, or is it a case of fake it till you make it on a large scale? So thank you for sharing that so much. All right, so we have talked a little bit about, kind of ways you stay up to date with your skills training. We also got a lot of questions from people that wanted to know if there are any non-traditional ways that either you have acquired skills that are useful in your role, or if you know of other people who've done this. So I found this a really interesting question, because instead of coming from the area of like transferable skills from one, different industry or different role to another, I think this is a really great way to kind of look at that idea of continuing education, right? Not only where can you get this information that is credible and it will help keep you up to date, but where can we seek out ways, like non-traditional ways to learn these skills in ways that might, work a lot better for some people than traditional, classes or, sessions or, articles, things like that. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Engineering wise, I think I've learned quite a bit. It's really funny. Recently, I learned quite a bit by building a robot and being a coach or mentor for my kids' robotics team a couple years ago.
What's that?
It was like, yeah, I'm an engineer and I do this stuff on a daily basis, but I don't have to do everything. I don't have to do all of the parts. And so being the coach and watching these kids and having to teach them how to do all these things, it pulled me kind of out of my world and let me go play in areas that I hadn't done really hands-on before. And so, or since college, right? So getting out there and just working with somebody else that's doing something. I mean, it's amazing what is available to children these days in terms of technology and STEM. And so just going out there and interacting with them, they start asking you questions. You go off and do a little research and you watch YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. Go watch videos and learn how to do it. It's just amazing that you can build some skills just by being out there being a volunteer. And they don't, volunteering is you giving your time, and you don't have to be the expert, but you can learn a lot.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could honestly sit here and talk to you for like another 20 minutes just about the robotics thing, because that was not a thing when I was a kid. And I'm absolutely fascinated by it. That's so, so cool. And I love that idea, right? Kind of taking an opportunity to connect with your kids and do, do something like, as like a volunteer project. I love that idea. So that way you can kind of, stretch and grow those skills, or maybe even just revisit skills that you used to flex a lot and you don't really use anymore.
Right.
So I love that. Okay, now let's move into, we've got about 20 minutes left in today's chat, maybe a little bit less, because I know we're going to talk about some open roles at Lockheed. But one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is kind of the less pleasant aspects of company culture and workplace dynamics in general. So we have a lot of questions. Presumably, I apologize if I'm misgendering or making assumptions on people. A lot of them seem to come from women, or people who might not fall within the standard, kind of dominant demographic within your field or your industry. This person had asked, how can I deal with coworkers who steal my ideas, talk over me, undermine me, or mess with my work? I wish I were being dramatic, but these are issues that I've been facing lately. And I mean, I know how I would deal with the situation, but I'm also not an engineer and I have nowhere near the experience. So I'm interested to hear your take on how you would handle this situation, especially if like you have any experience on this that hopefully not, but that you've experienced in your own career.
Okay, so I guess the best answer would be document everything. Keep a paper trail. Write in pen, write it in an email, write it in a note that's time-stamped. If you have ideas and concepts, get them documented, get them logged, and share them with your leadership before somebody else does. Even if it's an idea that's not fully fleshed out and you feel like, okay, I got this, don't wait until you've crossed every T and dotted every I, because somebody else gets wind of that. They may just very well go and throw it up before you do. And now it's their idea, not yours. So just document what you're doing. You got an idea. If you have a system to get that recorded in, do that. If not, if you got leadership chain or whatever your kind of environment, your culture environment is there that allows you to produce new ideas and request support for those things, do that earlier rather than later. My other thought is be like them. Honestly, don't shy
Yeah.
away. It's you, it's your work, it's your effort. Stand up for yourself. Be okay. You don't have to be mean or rude. You can be very tactful, but just be assertive and say, hey, that was an idea I had. I discussed it with you in confidence. Why are you now trying to take care of it? If you call them out, most likely they will start to stand down. But if you let them continue to do that, they will.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I know that's a little easier said than done, but rip the Band-Aid, go try it, to do it, but still remain tactful. Do not belittle them. Just be upfront about what has happened, be factual, and it'll handle itself over time.
Yeah. When I read this question, my heart kind of broke because we simplified it a little bit, but the person talked about like having their code messed with and things that were just like so beyond the pale of like, I want to look good and I can't let anybody else look good around me. And it just really, it reminded me how horrible some workplaces can be, but also, you know, kind of what you can learn from the situation, right? Because you're right, like you don't want to be that person, and you don't want to you know, you don't want them to be acting that way, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. I totally second the idea of recording everything. Hugely important, especially, I mean, even if you just type it up in an email, you know, hey, I know we talked about this at your desk, blah, blah, blah. I'm super excited to talk about this in the meeting. Or I loved developing this idea with you. I'm so glad that you saw, you know, potential in what, you know, in my initial thoughts, blah, 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 blah. The other thing, I haven't said this in a while. I used to have to say, or it used to come up on a lot of chats, but my mom's like advice to me is absolutely golden. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you don't tell anybody this is happening, it's not going to get fixed because no one else is going to just stumble into it. People are too focused on their own stuff. But when it happens, I love what you said about calling them out and doing so tactfully. My favorite tactic is to kind of not play dumb, but play like Pollyanna levels of altruistic, of like, oh, I'm sure there has to be a reasonable solution, or, you know, reasonable explanation for this. I know that I went through and checked all of this. Maybe there's a problem. So if you get more people kind of looking and more eyes on this situation, it's more like likely to come out what's actually happening. And when it comes to being in meetings and being talked over and that kind of thing, I'm not good at this in the moment. So I try and practice it a lot. And luckily I don't have to deal with this problem a lot anymore. But my mom calls it painting people into the nice corner. So if they say something during a meeting that's like kind of taking your idea or interrupting you, I like to go in and be like, oh, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm actually not done talking yet, but you can go immediately after me. Or my favorite is, hey, I'm kind of unclear by what you meant by this. I know you didn't mean to come across as misogynistic or stealing my idea or whatever. I know you didn't mean to come across like that. Could you kind of clarify for me what you meant? And that way they either have to stay in the nice corner that you've painted them into, or they have to take a very big step into jerk territory, and it's clear to everyone. And it's one of those things, for me at least, it's better and easier to remember because it kind of works in a lot of different situations and you don't have to try and think up something on the fly, because despite my performance here, when it comes to antagonistic situations, I'm not good at being on the fly. So hopefully that helps you. And I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that issue, whoever wrote that question in. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about your career journey. Can you tell us about some of the mistakes that you made while you were climbing up the ladder, especially if you know what you would have liked to have done differently?
I'll go with one really big mistake. I trusted my leader.
Oh.
And I've gone through many leadership training classes, many of them. And one of the, you know, if you ask this whole audience, what's, you know, give me a trait or a quality of a good leader. And chances are it's going to be openness, honesty, trust, something along those lines, right? Doesn't matter a whole lot of the other things, but if you don't trust the person you're working for, yeah, it's really not a great relationship.
Oh, it's awful.
And it took, I feel like it took me a while to realize the problem when it shouldn't have taken me that long. But I was in the mode of, okay, I want to go off and be a technical SME, and I want to just do the math that I enjoy doing, and I just want to play in the lab and build my hardware and test it out, and I want to just do those things. And so I got this new project. I got on a new program with a new leader, and he let me do just that. And I did all kinds of great things, had a really exciting, happy customer, did all kinds of field tests and flight tests, and produced great data, and found errors that other people had done who were so-called SMEs, and corrected those things. And I was just, to me, I was kicking butt, right? But
Sounds like it's
and
me.
right. And, so the first year I got an okay performance rating. And the next year was like, well, if you just do a little more. And then the next year was, well, if you just do a little more. And it came time to like, why am I, all the people around me who I kind of started here with, some people who started after me were getting promoted. Why wasn't I? And because he says, I don't think you're ready. I don't think you're ready. And I said, okay. Finally, I got tired of that. But the mistake I made there was I waited too long. I waited too long to fight back. And I kept expecting him to change, and I kept trying to please him, to show him I could be all the things he said I wasn't ready to be. But I
Use
was
that catch
already there.
22 and take it
Right.
over. And yeah.
Right. But I was already there, and I didn't know it. And everybody around me, and literally other managers and other leaders were like, I thought you had already been promoted. That's why I didn't say anything. I didn't open my mouth and say, hey, I want to be promoted. I didn't tell anybody that.
Yeah.
Why didn't I say that? I don't know. I really don't know.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how long ago this was, but it sounds very similar to a situation I was in like 3 careers ago. I don't even know. I've had so many jobs, but I had a very similar situation. And you're right. It's just one of those things where like you don't want to think badly of the person that's in charge of you, mostly because like, at least from my experience, people tend to kind of bring their own worldview to, they have their own worldview and they project that onto other people because that's just how we are as people, until you're proven otherwise. And so it's especially with a leader and somebody that you're trying to learn from and have as a resource for your career, you don't want to think that that's what this person has going on, because it's just so counterintuitive to teamwork, to getting work accomplished. Right. And I'm so sorry you experienced that. And you're right. It's one of those things you really do have to like raise awareness, not just within that relationship, but like be vocal to a lot of people about what you want. I feel like a lot of us are socialized to not talk about what you want in like I don't even know, like a cool kid crowd of like, if you show that you're trying too hard, it's not good for your reputation, or it's more, I don't know, it's more flattering for some people to think that it happens organically as opposed to like something you actually work for. But telling people where you want to go is really the only way to get help from other people to get there. They can't help you go somewhere if they don't even know you're planning on going anywhere. So yes. I absolutely love that. And I'm so sorry you went through that, because when I went through it, it was like kind of small enough potatoes. I knew that wasn't going to be my career forever by that point, sadly. But that's got to be so challenging, especially to get over and then go to a new manager and not have that, like, kind of bring that baggage with you.
Right.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right. So I want to try and get to one more question here before we switch gears. So a lot of people talked about kind of the challenges that they are facing at their jobs right now. And I'm really interested to find out what your biggest obstacle, or what you think the biggest obstacle is to thriving as an engineer, and how you overcame it, or how you're working to overcome it.
Faith in yourself.
People ask really great questions.
Yes. Faith in yourself. Okay. And goes back to kind of that same story with that manager, right? Having confidence that you are doing well, trusting that you know the things that you know, right? It is very easy, especially in this environment, as you said, with the majority of the environment being older white males. It is very, very difficult to walk into being the Black female who is doing the same thing that they are, and feel really small. And so I have just as good or better education than many of them. And I've had my experiences, and I've done amazing work, and recognizing that I do amazing work. it takes a while to trust that you're as good as you say you are, or you are as good as you should think you are. You have to believe that. I had other people around me telling me I was, but I didn't believe it. I didn't have that in, and I am a person of religious faith. And so I do put my trust in God, but I also have to trust that God has done well with me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing that. I was not believing that. And so that, after having dealt with that one manager, little retrospection and introspection, and I said, I am really this good. And when I did that and I opened up and I started talking to other people and explaining how good I was, and what work I could do to help others, and people were like, yeah, I heard you've done some great things. Can you come help me do that? My reputation took off.
Yeah.
And doors opened, and they opened very quickly. And this new role I'm in is part of that, those doors opening, because I became a manager. Before this level of management, I was what we call engineering and technology manager. And I love leadership. I love helping people move their careers forward, helping people grow and learn. I have that passion. It's just part of who I am. And we get these annual kind of surveys where they survey our teams to see how your leaders are treating you and how things are going. And I looked back at the history of those surveys for me, and they were all excellent. I had no complaints from my team members, and which means, hey, I'm a great leader. And then I'm not trying to be arrogant, but it was just who I was, and it worked out well. And recognizing that when this opportunity came to be in the position I am in, I almost passed it up. And I had a lot of people telling me, no, you'd be great at that. And so I'm new at it. I'm still learning and I'm still growing in it, but I'm excited about it. And I'm looking forward to the experience that it's going to bring. And I wouldn't have gotten here. I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't have that faith in myself. And others had that faith in me as well.
I said there's always a moment on these chats where I get that like mind blown moment, and I've already had that at least once so far, but you also have me like real deep in my feels about this, because that idea of not believing when other people tell you that you're getting good at something, or not really trusting your own perceptions of like, well, I think maybe I'm getting better, but maybe I'm not, and I just don't know. And we're always our own harshest critic, right? Like, I'm not a person of faith. I find that so admirable in people that are. My mom is very into her religion and into her faith. And so that's one of the things she is constantly telling me, is like, have faith in yourself, because if you don't, you're basically disrespecting, kind of the being that put you here, or the being that like created all of this and whatever. And over the years, with my agnosticism and her Roman Catholic faith, we've come to kind of an agreement that, like, at the very least, I need to not disrespect the fact that she made me from scratch and raised me, to be a good person in the world. And so if I don't have faith in her skills and her best intentions for me, then, or if I don't have faith in my own abilities, I should at least have faith in her skills and the dedication that she brought to parenthood. So I thank you so much for reminding me of that. I honestly was tearing up there for a moment. So thank you. Thank you for having a long enough answer that it covered the waterworks that was threatening to overtake me. Thank you so much for that. I absolutely love that. And I'm so glad that you were able to kind of really develop that faith in yourself.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Okay, so not to like kind of give everybody a whiplash here, but we're gonna shift gears a little bit into some of the open roles at Lockheed. Now, my coworker Paloma is gonna share her screen here, so we can check out what's going on. I actually am not able to see the screen, probably because of my Zoom glitch, so my apologies there. I'm just gonna assume that that's where we are. So I see that there's a bunch of these roles that are kind of open at Lockheed Martin. My coworker is also going to share in the chat thread the link to Lockheed's company page where you can follow. Are any of the roles that are posted here, are any of them either kind of within your department, or somebody that would work kind of in concert with you or your team? Can you speak to any of these roles here?
So the first one for sure.
Okay.
The first one, systems engineering, system design and requirements. That is actually, so I am in the system engineering directorate, and we have about 1,100 engineers between Orlando and Dallas or Grand Prairie. And so I don't remember the exact number, but a couple hundred or so are systems engineers who do system design and requirements. And so they are the ones who are kind of the upfront. You get a set of requirements from your customer to develop a product, and they kind of lay out the architecture of how that product should go together, what all the specific requirements are for that product based on what the customer says they need. And then they get those flowed down to specific subsystems and different interfaces and things. And so they help kind of make sure the system as a whole will do what it needs to do. And they exist on a program from beginning to end. So that's in the department that I am part of. I don't focus on them in terms of being a manager. That's a couple of other people that are in my directorate that focus on them, but it's definitely a big need. And systems engineering is, you really need to be a person who can understand the big picture to really be good at it, as well as the details and not lose the details, because in the end, we are responsible for the overall performance of a system to make sure it really does do what it needs to do. And so if a hardware person or a software person comes along and they perform something incorrectly, it's up to us to catch that and do our best to help avoid it ever happening, to make sure they have proper requirements, to make sure they have proper verification and validation of what they are doing.
Okay.
So it's known across the whole system. I'll jump down to aeronautical engineer. That's also part of the group I'm in, where I focus on sensor technologies and signal and image processing. I have two other counterparts who focus on some other technology areas like aeronautics. And that's really a very specialty area, but those who can help design air vehicles, whether it's, for us, it's going to be missiles. We don't do airplanes here. And so that would be that kind of a position, is somebody that understands the aerodynamics of a system and how to model those things and how to write requirements to make sure the hardware designers actually can build the system correctly.
Awesome. That's so cool. And I love kind of getting the breakdown on this, because I get to talk with so many people that work in fields I have nothing to do with. My husband is in aviation, so I have a little bit of knowledge, but not tons. So I love listening to people talk about, kind of the ways that these different companies work, especially, something as big as Lockheed. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right, so we're at time, so apologies to anybody who's got a hard stop, but you will be able to rewatch the recording of this. I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Karen. I know that today has not been the easiest or most seamless of events, but you have handled this beautifully, and I really, really appreciate you, kind of taking the time to share your expertise with us, as well as sharing a lot of like kind of vulnerable things. So that is always hugely impactful to me, even when I don't end up crying on the call. But I just want to say a big thank you to you for spending time with our community today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really good experience. I'm sorry for being late, but I enjoy sharing because I'm human, and I've been in this world for a bit, this engineering world for a bit, and I've had some interesting experiences. So I was glad to share, just to let everybody know, if you're going through something, you're probably not the only one going through it.
Yes, very true. And unfortunately, there's probably somebody that's already gone through it that could help you through. And that's why we need more open communication and more transparency about when people experience these things at work, because in a perfect world, they wouldn't happen. But since you're dealing with people, the best we can hope for is to continually kind of lessen the amount of people and situations that like this have to be dealt with. So huge thank you to our attendees as well. I really enjoyed getting to kind of share this event with you. Y'all submitted amazing questions before today's session. There were some really deep ones.
Love the questions.
Yes, they were great. So huge thank you to all of you for that. I hope that if this was your first Power to Fly event, that you'll join us for many more. Our events are always free. We're hosting a ton of great chats next week, as well as our mini summit happening at the end of September, the 20th through the 23rd. So hopefully you will join us for more events in the future, as well as take a look at Lockheed's company page and see if there's any roles there that might suit you. Can't wait to see you all on chats in the future. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Bye, everybody.